Hi there, how are you? Welcome to the May edition of the Simic report. And geez, I tell you what, there's been a lot of activity going on, not only through the month of April that we've just wrapped up, but also, tying into March as well. No doubt coronavirus or COVID-19 has had a big impact, not just globally, but obviously very, very locally for us and very relevant to our world. It's impacted a lot of businesses and has impacted the real estate sector, and it's heavily talked about. So what we'll do is we're going to tie in as much information as we can. We'll try and keep it as simplistic as possible and make sure the information is relevant. We'll dive straight into the property management space and then we'll come back over to sales if that's okay with you. So, Bernadette?
So with obviously the COVID situation, the current legislation laws doesn't support being able to obviously do any sort of rental reductions and any sort of rental payments with regards to tenants being affected, but also landlords being affected as well. So on Friday the 24th of April, new legislation laws in Queensland have come in, which has given us the ability as property managers to be able to communicate clearly with tenants and landlords of what their obligations are during these COVID-19 situations. So things that we need to look at is with the tenants situation, if they can't afford to pay rent, they do need to provide evidence to support these claims as well. So we just can't take their word for it. We do ask them and require them to provide information on their income and to see if they've actually applied for rental grants as well. With landlords, if landlords are affected, this is where we obviously try to help and assist them as well. So there are COVID-19 legislation laws that have come in. So if anyone is affected, we will be providing those obviously the laws, the legislations to them and what information we actually require. However, if a tenant is not affected, this is where normal legislation laws apply. So we have to be very clear if you are affected or if you're not.
And that's probably been the biggest debate or misinformation with regards to COVID-19 and what impact it's had for tenancy laws, both in the commercial space, but more in our world being the residential space. So finally, after some banter going back and forth, legislation, Queensland Parliament or the Queensland Government put forward a proposed legislation that was heavily contested by the industry bodies, the REIQ, and also members within the real estate fraternity and also landlords. So I know a very large number of property managers, a very significant number of landlords opposed proposed changes put forward by the Queensland Government. The Queensland Government, the Palaszczuk government, did take that on board. That was heavily underpinned by the campaign put forward by the REIQ, and they drove that campaign for that change.
And we thank them for that as well.
They did a fantastic job because it was heavily in favour of the tenants. The proposed legislation put forward the fact that tenants could request a reduction in rent without providing any evidence or proof that they're affected by coronavirus, amongst other measures about extending leases without any discussions. It was just too heavily in favour of the tenants. So common sense prevailed. So now there is a framework and a guideline.
There is, and so with these guidelines, it does make it a lot easier for us to actually be able to communicate with tenants and landlords.
Clearly.
Where in the past, prior to the 24th of April, it was very difficult. And we did have to do our absolute best to try to mitigate the situation between both parties. But now that these laws are in place, it definitely does make it clear with what we need to do, which makes it easier.
And that's a big part of what we have to do now is when it's been now reliant on us to communicate those laws that have come into effect to the tenants, because probably one of the biggest issues that we've heard is tenants heard ScoMo jump on TV saying you can't evict for the next 6 months. That is only applicable for tenants that are affected by COVID.
Correct.
If they're not affected, and now you have to provide evidence to and pass certain elements or thresholds to prove what affected by COVID is. If you are not affected by COVID, as you said before, standard legislation applies. So that 6-month moratorium on evictions does not apply if you're not affected by COVID. And that was the biggest issue that we had over the last sort of 1 to 2 months,
Yep.
was tenants believing that it was applicable to all.
Yep.
So that's cleared up, which is really, really good.
And it's definitely made it a lot easier for us to do our work as well.
And to communicate.
Yeah, definitely. So the other thing I wanted to quickly discuss about is just your advertising as well. So we've in the past spoken about how important it is to ensure that you have got professional photos on your property. We've even gone now one step further where we're doing Matterport 3D, and we're also doing floor plans on our property. So that's really important, plus videos. So I'm doing a walkthrough video on a lot of our properties, just so this way tenants that can't actually physically go out and inspect a property, they can still be able to put together with having a 3D Matterport, floor plans, a virtual video of me walking through, and also some professional photos. So that's really important in today's market, to be able to advertise, to be able to advertise your property like that. And that's what reduces your days on market with having your property sit online.
Yeah, and so in light of COVID, we've still been transacting a number of properties within the rental space. We're still getting properties rented. We were always ahead of the game compared to our competitors when it came to marketing properties, being professional photography. That was always there. The size of ads online and how we promote and the availability to view properties, we've now just notched it a bit further, haven't we? So we've just kept that trend going as far as getting properties leased and not necessarily being too affected by coronavirus and COVID-19. Probably, and there's a saying that we're hearing in the industry at the moment, the only thing that's really happened is 10 years of innovation have taken place in 2 weeks. So we've had to adapt quickly. We've done that. We've always been at the forefront of technology as a real estate business, and we've adopted that within the business now and adjusted to market conditions, and we're still getting those outcomes, so still positive.
So that's about it for me.
That's it? Okay, so on my end of the spectrum, being the sales market, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of talk at the moment about what COVID-19's doing and what it's going to do for the property market. Now, there's a lot of banter, a lot of talk about everyone can predict the future apparently when it comes to things like this. But what's interesting is hearing the dialogue and the language from buyers very early in the piece when coronavirus came to fruition. It had a significant impact not only on the Australian public, but the real estate sector in particular, with the inability to do open homes. They were quickly stopped. Auctions were also ceased and taking place physically on site. So we also adopted a very similar approach with what you're doing in the property management space, doing virtual walkthroughs of me walking through the property, introducing every room, every cupboard, every drawer, as if the buyer's virtually walking through the property. We've always done the promotional videos, we've done the professional photography, we've always done those things as well. But we've also applied the 3D Matterport virtual 3D tours in addition to the virtual walkthroughs. So we've also adopted a significant shift in how we promote properties, but our ability to take buyers through private open homes. What it's effectively done is taken away the efficiency that we had on a Saturday, where we would open a home on a Saturday, have 10 buyers through. We couldn't do that anymore. So now we had to do private appointments. So to be able to take those 10 over a 15-minute increment each, because they couldn't come through together, started to prove a bit challenging. But what became very interesting was speculation of buyers thinking that property values, because they read it in the media, that they were going to drop 30 to 40 to 60% over the next 1 to 2 to 3 or 6 months. Now, we don't believe that's going to happen, because what has effectively happened, what we're referring to pre-COVID and now either during or post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we would have a certain number of properties come to market as a regular number. We'd have a number of buyers, and that would be a supply and demand. What's actually happened is the number of properties that have come to market has significantly decreased. So vendors that don't need to sell are not selling. They've either elected to withdraw their property from market. We haven't seen too many of those. What we have seen is a number of owners saying, I'm not going to sell right now, we don't need to sell, we're just going to defer it to, say, September, October, November, or when the dust settles when it comes to COVID-19. Number of buyers in the market, though, that has also dropped. Now, when you look at the data, the buyers of the 10 on average that we would see come through a property per week, that has now dropped to around 3 to 5. Now, pre-COVID, those 10 buyers, be it that they are 10 buyers coming through, 5 of those 10 were not in a position to buy anyway. They were what I would refer to as a research mode buyer. They could not sign a contract if that was the perfect home and they were happy with the price. Their finance wasn't ready, they haven't sold yet. So those buyers are no longer in the market. The balance of the other buyers, the other 5, are in the market. Now, when you weigh that up with about 40 to 50% less properties on the market than this time last year, you start to get a balance of where we were pre-COVID, just with lower volumes, lower volume of properties for sale, lower number of buyers. The evidence is in the last 2 weeks of April, I transacted 5 properties in a period of 10 days. A number of those properties actually had multiple offers. In addition to that, the banks are not the distressed sales that some buyers were hoping for that would underpin a 30 to 50% drop in values. Banks aren't repossessing homes, they're deferring loans. So they are also underpinning real estate as a commodity, as an investment in the market, and that's going to hold the value steady. Now, does that mean that our values will not soften? I believe they will soften a little bit, but not to the extent that you're hearing some media outlets spruiking, or buyers probably wishfully thinking that would happen. And I think they've also come to terms that that's not going to be the case, and that ties into the activity that we're seeing in the market, where buyers are now competing again, in some situations multiple offers, because I think they're coming to terms with the fact that those significant price drops aren't going to happen. So it is a real watch this space, but as the restrictions start to ease and we start going back to normality, I think the industry will just go back to how it always was, and life will go on, and hopefully everyone stays safe and everyone's gone through a very interesting chapter, once in a generation event, and I hope everyone stays safe as we go through the month of May and into June, and we look forward to talking to you in the June edition of the Simic Report. We'll see you then.